Sirius, Dallas, Moon here, it's Shirley. This is Jupiter Hour, and I wanted to talk about peacekeeping weapon because weapon industry is such a hot topic, and both because Mercury retrograde is bringing the unexpectedly exploding bombs that cause people to die of friendly fire, but also what would be the characteristics of peacekeeping weapon. There is a genuine challenge between the economic need to keep a weapon industry up to speed with the requirement of defense and the fact that we use weapon to bring peace. And what peace is to different people with different interests is a different thing. For some people, peace is when the money is flowing. When the money is coming in, that's peace. But then, if the money is coming in and the bomb drops on the unexpected housing, particularly in the age of AI, then that piece is actually, okay, there's another component being added to that piece. I remind you, Mercury retrograde is where accidents can happen. Mars rules both weapon and real estate business. And accidents. So but when it comes to the fact that we need to be well equipped to deal with threats, and the process of being well equipped increases threats. Okay, think about it. You move into a nice neighborhood, okay? Then you see a neighbor going with a gun. Immediately you understand that if you don't have a gun today, tomorrow you should have. Then another neighbor begins to move around with a safety car. Okay? As far as I would see it, it means that the real estate prices are dropping, but we did that to protect the real estate to begin with. No, seriously, you move around the neighborhood, you see everybody in safety cars, everybody this, everybody that, everybody, you say either you moved into Aspen or something, or it's a really bad neighborhood. Like who lives here, right? And what are their wealth practices and rituals? So when it comes to trying to bridge that gap, the fact that everybody wants to have peace of mind, we need the ability to defend ourselves for that peace of mind, while developing the ability to defend ourselves, we increase the problem of defense. I mean, this is how the problem originated. Okay, there were people around the earth, and then they began to meet each other, and then they began to fight. And so the Bible said it was Cain and Abel began to fight, and one of them unalived the other. So if this is as old as the Bible, and it happened in the brotherhoods back then, it was two brothers. So the brotherhoods have been a problem ever since Genesis. But then, how do you solve that problem? When we have, and let's take a look at the spirit of the time, the cosmology bias that we have looking at this problem. So this is Jupiter. Our Jupiter is exalted, that's okay. The moon is in Pisces, fantastic, separating from Rahu, about to ingress into the sign of weapon industry, and that is into Aries. And so we understand that, however cynical, we have a little bit of an engineering problem. And with Uranus in Gemini and Saturn in Aries, we can both instill the cynical glasses and remove them and take a look at the picture, whether we see it as everybody wants to rule the world, enslave other people so that they will have triangular boots and fungal toes. I did not have slaves, I was just an athlete, but other people had slaves, and that creates health problems, not just for the slaves, because you think that your life would be easier when somebody else does it. Then both they do it wrong, they put poison in the food, they want liberation. Why? Because they're sovereigns. People are born free, and to the surprise of each and every culture in each and every time, all people, regardless of the sex and gender and origin and plasma and blood and a reptile brain or whatnot, all people are born free. Sovereigns. You see that Jupiter playing in, but also the strong Aries. All people are born free. That means that all people are born free and sovereign, and that means that slavery, first of all, is artificial and unnatural and unhealthy. Because if you take a sovereign being, Aries rules the head and sovereignty, okay? So sovereignty, it rules for people to be sane, they need sovereignty. Otherwise, they go cuckoo until they are sane. And if you just put them in, oh, they're cuckoo, so we're going to put them away, then they make a rebellion in the jails, in the hospitals, in the secluded places, yes. People are used to be sent to exile, because then they would be lonely, they would be with nature. And so, which was not a good resolution either, because the spirits that the isolated person summons, yes, it is. Think about Neptune. It rules isolation, but it also rules the assets in Monaco when it's in Aries. It's the void, the longing, the manifestation, and the fact that it's global. So that's the invisible power of Neptune. A person doesn't even believe they have a voice, so they speak and they speak and they speak, and then apparently they were heard by more than they expected. Not a documentary or anything. And I'm thinking with you about this engineering problem attended to political assassination prevention, and the more I tended to it, the more it began to look like the Divine Comedy. And yet if I take away the glasses of cynicism and I look at it as an engineering problem, I understand that people had a lot of problems with themselves and they came up with a lot of ideas. They tried to trace nature, Saturn playing in, okay, the history of the problem. They try to trace nature and learn from nature. So they learn from animals how to fight, and they learn and how to mate, and I guess some animals are not so good teachers. Others fantastic. And they learned, okay, many things, and then they began to develop their own. Some people believe that they connected with aliens. Maybe they are aliens, we are aliens, I don't know. And they began to build things to give themselves some peace, okay, so to build little houses and little weapons and to hunt food and to eat food. And for some godforsaken reason, we hear, again, there was a Nordic tribe researcher that came up with news that, much like Hitler said, unfortunately, the Nordic tribes, the Vikings, they were at constant war with each other. They found it through the numerous skulls that that they had. So, Rosicrucians go only so far back. Khazarian mafia maybe a little farther. But even before them, there was dumbfuckery. And we try to settle that, and we try to think what would be the traits of peacekeeping weapon. Because if we don't know how to fight, then it's very difficult to maintain peace. But if we know too well how to fight, then that's all we do. Yes, think about this in the society of feudalism. If that bloodline is good fighters, then they would go. The fighters class would go from tribe to tribe to help in wars. They would constantly fight. Maybe Hitler was of this tribe, so he believed that they constantly need to be on everlasting world. Though he had Mars in Taurus, and that's usually lazy, so I don't know. But it was in the 8th house, and that's indeed perpetual war. Now, eventually, if the weapon is too disturbing, then indeed the war can be successful in the sense that it obliterates the enemy, but this is a very temporary win. A very temporary win, particularly when it comes to ritual sacrifice and stuff like that. It gives very temporary win, okay? It's a very unstable way to run an existence. And Aries rules both war and existence. The god of war, Ares, yes, it is the way that the gods of the war are worshipped. There are rituals to war. There are rituals to everything in life, and there are rituals to war. But it is the way that war is fought, and it is the way that those rituals are done, that again prompts the question, if sacrifice to the god of war would bring peace, would we not be in eternal peace? If that was economic, to sacrifice to the god of war, would there be eternal peace? Because he would sacrifice, and then when you sacrifice, then you are at peace. But it's not so. I know from satanic ritual abuse survivors, and those are the fights between the wealth families. Okay, so you think about the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and the this and the that. The Rothschilds themselves, I don't know about the entire family, but even in the testimony that I heard, they didn't perform the rituals on the children. They did not rape the children, at least from the testimony. There may be other testimonies, but they would take them to other places, so other would perform rituals and also ritual rape on the children, to get to appease, okay, to make agreements. That was okay, a child would be an offering, and they had to train the children by the kings of the world families. So, of course, when it comes to sexual sovereignty, and this is the first point of interference, the sexuality that is not balanced is in perpetual fight and perpetual depletion. The sexuality that is not sovereign and balanced is in a permanent failed army state. Okay? And I remind, all people are born sovereign and free. So if the sexuality is not balanced, it is people-made. They were not born like that. And so I know they will try to talk a lot about genetics. When it came to cloning, very simple. One family, one child goes with ritual abuse, the other cloned but without. The cloned but without grows normal. The guy with the ritual abuse grows act normal. Okay? And that's just showing the importance of upbringing. I'm not saying there cannot be genetic anomalies, and I'm not saying that those anomalies cannot affect other things, but I'm talking in general. So, if we are born free and we are born sexually sovereign, not in the sense that children can have sex with other people, they cannot. Okay, let's just put it that way. If you wonder if you could sleep with the child, ask yourself the question. Say that child decides on the family expenses, hedge funds, trust funds, and they make the decisions, not on their name, because a lot of folks write it on the children's name, right? So they make the decisions, it's not on their name. They pull the strings, okay? Would you let them? If not, don't sleep with them. And you say, but surely that leads to, yes, that explains how women were treated for pretty much the last couple of centuries. Yes, since Diana turned from a fertility goddess to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and protectress of both mothers, childless women, and the children. Why? Because both of them needed protection from rape. What changed? Men discovered that the sperm it is also important to conception. So in astrology, when we read the asteroid Diana, we have to keep in mind of what is the historical context within which we give that reading. Because before Hellenistic times, she was fertility goddess. After Hellenistic times, we got the day sex and the night sex, and then we have Artemis. Yes, so Nothing like the story of Princess Diana to exemplify that. And she was the people's princess, fertile, and she was she was wed because the king wanted, the prince back then, now king, wanted children, and so she would bring in children to the table, but it was not into her. And she got all the love of the people, okay? Because in the historical context, that's the story of Diana in that historical context. Um, so when we think to having peace, we describe that as a dynamic balance of yin and yang. When you can dance the dance and you enjoy the dance, that's peace. Yeah, regardless of yes, if it's gay dance, yes, straight, and that doesn't matter. That's the essence of that piece. So our entire life existence should be supportive of that dance. Now, if we make the wealth rituals, because the wealth is funding the wars, okay? From the wealth perspectives, and this is how the Rothschilds began to have beef with Europe, or particularly France, in the Second World War. And so did the Rockefellers eventually, because they were funding both sides of the civil wars. Right now we have Uranus in Gemini again. And this is a reminder to the Rothschild. I actually pitched the Rothschild. You can do that on Facebook. You simply tag a Rothschild and they actually see that. Which you wouldn't think that they do, but they do. And they care to. So at this time, the side that wins the civil war is the side that abolishes slavery the best. And the Weld family that is up to speed with that, instead of funding both sides of the civil war, they can reduce up to 90%, because you think about the fact that a lot of countries have a lot of civil wars, and the fact that the slavery abolishing movement are international, but the opposing movement are very diverse. So they can reduce up to 90% of the funding and still win the war, which is very much good for the economicity, but is also going to look very well on the family's wealth history. The wealth families that's going to get that, they're going to have a lot of legacy wealth that preserves itself and is not going to go against what the majority of the people want. So, and it's going to win them over land, because this is basically Rohini Nakshatra, where Uranus is going to Rohini Nakshatra, and this is being victorious over land. Okay, the state of Israel, for example, has Mercury on Aldebaran, and it won over the land and has a declaration of independence that was never before seen up to 1948. Perhaps in the coming days we'll have a Palestinian Declaration of Independence, and the more this declaration will support equity regardless of sex, gender, religions, and so on, the better chances they have to take that civil war time and timeline. But what happened to the Rothschilds is they didn't do it. They funded both sides, which is both not economic, especially since during the civil war we had previous examples of civil war. So they had an example where the side that abolished the slavery won, but they were doing something else that was good. They were practicing biodiversity. Okay, those are the people that fund our weapon industry. So this is important to understand, where does the money come from. And they also own the secret societies. There is an Illuminati Rothschild dynasty. By the way, I spoke a lot about the fact that I dislike human sacrifice. I'm not the only one who spoke about it. You might not see it on the media, on Fox News or CNN, but they see it, and they began to target the publishing of the Illuminati, marketing the fact that marketing what they claim to be is that in Illuminati there is no human sacrifice. So whether it's true or not, they definitely began to adjust to the needs of the market, which is the people. Okay, we are the market of opinions and the market of ideologies that are going to, put up the war for those ideologies, and so we are the weapon market for those who want to fund both sides of any civil war or any fight in general, global and local. And so, again, like me, there are masses of voices that are calling to abolish human sacrifice on a mass level. Each one is thinking that nobody hears them. But the big guys that need that information, they know how to get that, because that is the information that they adjust their mockingbirds to, they adjust their secret societies to, and hopefully one day they adjust their rituals to, and actually have wealth that stand the test of time and is also enjoyable to experience life in, and so for all of us. So when they were doing biodiversity, when the other people were doing eugenics, they basically survived the timeline that was quite tragic to humanity. But they had to give up estates because the fact that they funded or was suspected to fund both sides of the civil wars, that was something that was seen as treason. And so those are the problems of the wealth families in terms of the image, and it does affect the assets, the buildings. There's a rotting mansion of the Rothschilds in France. Okay, the Jewish family is filled with the crosses. Yes, and it's rotting and it's giant, and it just sits there, and they had to abandon it because it was not safe for the Rothschild to stay in Europe. And we unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you see that, in such times, fortunately, because it's an opportunity both for the side of the wealth families and for the side of people. And this is where Uranus Gemini has its cunningness, where it can adjust world peace, and that's the opportunity. World peace, civil rights, abolishing of slavery, economic weapon trade that doesn't rot, okay, that is able to defend, but doesn't go over the top as well. Okay, doesn't go into a point where we constantly are in a weapon. It is an industry, so there are always going to be the frontiers of science. Most of science began in the Cold War. It was the recent, but in the wars, because this is where we have all the innovation, and then what's good for the army is usually later going to be useful for the people. And yes, its entire humanity advances through struggle as well, but we also don't want to spend our entire life in perpetual struggle. So the components is, first of all, to get realistic. It's a very human desire that robot will do something for me. Okay, for example, I have a lovely cooler here, yeah? And I have a lovely cooler. I know that cooler is gonna need its break, otherwise it's gonna explode on me. It's gonna heat up and explode. I can't, there's only so much that this thing can work without going on an eternal strike or on an Italian strike. And that's technology. Okay? Our human body doesn't work better than technology. However sophisticated. If we bring in the astrology, technology also has a Uranus retrograde, a Mercury retrograde, a fallout, harsh aspects with Mars and Mercury, harsh aspects with Mars and Uranus can bring us, okay, hacking, can bring us explosions, excess heat now in the summer. It's very difficult to have a war in the summer. And so, even though weapon industry, yes, it's bringing money and a lot of people are invested, so that brings another facet. People are invested in weapon industry. It's not an unethical investment, but we have to understand that equilibrium, because when something is traded, there is the stock and there is the company, and there's not always a connection between them. So this is a problem not only of the weapon industry, a feature or a bug, you decide, but also when it comes to the weapon industry, if there is going to be war, it can create a bubble in the stock of a company that might not be able to yield in terms of the quality and the quantity of the weapon, and with Saturn in Aries, Saturn rules delays, the weapon to arrive on time. Okay? Such scandals, if they're not broadcasted, they might not be a big deal, but if they leak to the media, which they will with Neptune, because Neptune is in the sign of war, and it rules information that leaks as well, then what's going to happen is going to have a bubble pop of the investments in the world, in the weapon industry, which unfortunately is one of the predictions for the Saturn-Neptune conjunction even later this month. The weapon, very briefly, there was a very beautiful discussion between Secretary General Mark Rutte of NATO and Donald Trump in Trump's office about a weapon deal. Because it's Mercury retrograde, so United States develop the weapons and European countries buy that weapon. So they get to spend on defense and they get to do that on an American company right now, while they need to boost the European weapon industry. And Rutte is, of course, calling to do that, whether it's by more shifts or, I don't know, some grand ideas. Perhaps this is where astrology can go into the mix. And what we need to keep in mind is that Mercury is retrograde. So the terms of this contract are liable to change. And the changes, because Mercury now rules Uranus, are going to be unexpected. And the challenge that comes to mind for me when I think about the topic is take into account that the information is going to leak. If I was a weapon company or a broker that sells weapon industry stocks and bonds and so on, then the first thing I would want to adjust my marketing strategy to is that information is going to be more airy. Okay, it's going to leak, and not only that, it's going to leak the way it usually does with both right and wrong information. Yes, in the politics or international arena, we know that very obviously. There is telepathy, there are multiple channels of channeling, and there are multiple means of noises and omens. So we get a lot of noises and a lot of omens, and we have to discern, and they hide the omens within the noises, and it looks like the world salad. that the ladies that divorced complained, my husband was a narcissistic ta 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 ta. I was like, tell me your husband works for the CIA without telling me your husband works for the CIA. But you can't say it. So there was a method developed for these men and ladies to get a divorce, which is usually about, I'm not a lawyer, but about stating that you just want to move on with your life and you decided to end the marriage and get the best contract for you, not complain, document everything, and not complain too much about the person. Yes, but this is because that person is working for those cults. Okay? But why they do that is because they need to transmit information in such a way that the people that get that, and the people that don't, and they need to hide the omens within a lot of noise, and usually those that get that are not necessarily those that they meant for them to get that, and those that don't are exactly the ones that they meant for them to get that, and that is and that's another feature of communication. So there's going to be unusual behavior of the markets, but also of the trading in weapon companies. And that can create unusual behavior of people, where they decide to go short on something, or they decide to try to act like a millionaire on a stock that is going total loss. That's how the bubble happened. The 29 crisis happened because people en masse said, don't listen to the weather of the markets and so on and so forth. And then the market went kaput and people kept going until the market was totally kaput. But what we are marketed was that, oh, there was a decrease and then people sold immediately, and so on and so forth. No, people that actually make the game of the markets, they don't do it on their account. And that goes back to the wealth families, that they can decide they want to pull off a stunt because they're also instilling the currency during heightened conflict, like the Second World War, moving from the gold standard, okay, moving away from the gold standard, and now we are already having the digital euro dropping, attempts to try social credit score, and all the many things that some of them is the reason that I'm able to talk to you and deliver that. And some of them is the reason I'm not able to do that from my own house with a yard and children running outside, because children is a hot topic. I seen a screen today that screams satire, and it had to do with the juxtaposition of the Epstein scandals as something that they're going to broadcast in the next one up. And another thing, and I'm going to let you guess what the social engineers that watch my screen saw, and leave it at that. So, yes, there are all those, wealth rituals that are not so wealthy, because every toddler knows, if you a toddler in a wealth family, then every toddler knows that your sexual energy is how you manifest, and it needs to be sovereign. And this perhaps is why the Rothschilds, according to the testimony of the survivor that I heard, yes, there can be other testimonies, did not rape children themselves. Maybe they did in other contexts, I don't know, okay? But the thing is that to have wealth that stands the test of time, the sexual energy needs to be the clearest, and they have to stay away from a lot of the practices. And it's not about sin, it's about balancing yin and yang. Sexual boundary violation is just violating that balance, causing inflammation, infertility, degeneration of the race, and so on and so forth. and many things, and basically taking the will to live from people, and all type of things that when people want to keep people in mind control, then they have rituals where they rape each other and this and that is and later they are mind controlled. Okay, part of those things is MK Ultra with its many gates that I'm calling to defund. I'm not the first one calling to defund. I'm sitting on the shoulders of giants because Bill Clinton in '95 was calling to defund MK Ultra, the cloning project. And then, of course, when I mentioned that, I got backlashes that Bill Clinton was a clone. I said that it's very likely he was a clone, yet of those clone projects, a person that was born by cloning and very likely went through those type of rituals, calling to defund, yes, then we understand how to juxtapose a scandal in adjacent time to that, but we also, and it was a true scandal, it was not like he was not guilty or anything like that, but the way that these things are run is that there are always going to be tapes on many people. Okay, somewhere out there is a tape of me very likely wiping my ass. So why? Because I do astrology, and because if you think there is not a tape of you wiping your ass in the bathroom, then very likely you are wrong, regardless of what you do in life, because it's the age of air, and that's used to extort people. So radical acceptance is needed. This is also when we talk about diplomatic conflicts. Yes, if people hold on to, if people are easily shamed, easily offended, yes, but then there is also the understanding that if we do rituals to shame and to offend, supposedly to desensitize the person from that, or rituals of humiliation, then also the sexual energy goes out of balance and it's difficult to be vulnerable and to be intimate. Those things are also needed for a healthy nervous system. That pertains from the sovereign soldier to the sovereign general to the sovereign wealth family, politician, and the common person, and so on. So Neptune again invites us to look at the topic in an all-encompassing way. So together we understand that when it comes to funding those who are in line with slavery, however humane is that we want other people to do the job because we think it will bring us peace, that is not only not a winning strategy. I mean, the Rothschilds survived the Second World War. Yes, they lost some estates, but they could have avoided that loss, and they are old money. So this is interesting to them to invest, to be more economic. Okay, to be invest less and to yield more, and yield stands the test of time. So, and this is true to not only wealth families, but to many people that are thinking opportunities at this time. Even if it is the opportunity to make a life while making a living and have a roof over your head. There are rivers running through Beijing, New York, and manufactured or not manufactured, they have fishes and home with them. And it's not nice when this is anybody's home, but it's also preferred to be very far away from the home when that happens. So we need to travel a lot. The technology to do that was built at war. So that's our challenging situationship when it comes to maintaining world peace and economy and so on. So again, it's to the wealth practices, sexually sovereign, let children have childhood, all of these wealth practices are also the practices that when we fund them for the common people, we have better land takeovers that stand the test of time, declarations of independence. You know, we can say a lot of things about Israel. Astrologically, financially, 1948 to 2025, this is not a bad real estate deal that doesn't yield anything, unlike what Trump addressed with Gaza, which was a bad real estate deal that they thought would bring peace but didn't. And the reason it didn't is because we did not have the opportunity that now Palestine does have, and that is to make a declaration of independence that would put both Israel and the United States Declaration of Independence to sleep when it comes to how advanced it would be in terms of human rights, legalization of human rights, independently of sex, gender, origin, bloodline, and so on and so forth. Okay, unlike the Jews, the Palestinians are not a religion, so they don't have to call themselves a democratic Jewish country, and we've been dealing with that dissonance that looks very bad to begin with, and also is very challenging to run a country like that. It's not the fault of the Jews, but it's definitely very challenging, okay? So there's those, you see, just one thing, sexual sovereignty. Let children have childhood, sexual sovereignty for all people. Then this takes the civil wars. And if you take the civil wars, you take the world wars. Why? Because if inside your society is already adapted to be inclusive of the disabled, of those who are considered the crazy, of those who are considered the criminal, of the different bloodlines, of the different the people, to abolish slavery, then it's already less susceptible to be invaded. And if it is, you have the strategic advantage that the enemy would prefer to have a blue ID. This is an advantage that Israel has had for quite some time until it began to be, a bit Pfizer. And then it's lost its strategic advantage and lost some land as well. Currently, a lot of people don't have a home in Israel, and there's no food here. So again, when it comes to one simple principle, let children have childhood, sexual sovereignty, human rights, it's a wealth practice. It's in terms of economicity during civil wars, you don't have to fund both sides because you're already betting on the winner. Financially, okay, you go to competition, you want to be betting. What if you knew who was going to win? Now, particularly if you fund for them and you don't fund for the other ones, then people are going to say that you are unfair. But hey, if it is human rights, then they don't really have a valid moral argument. And economically, they don't have an argument either. That's the beauty of Urano-Geminites, both the economic cunningness that coincides, and it really is a coincidence, but it's a blessed coincidence that allowed women the right to vote, people the right to have a vacay, children. The fact that we are talking of Epstein's scandal as a scandal is because of those civil wars where children began to have a childhood, because they're usually traded. Our leaders, as children, they were traded. That's the part that they can't tell you, so they keep the list tight. And the survivors, one day they remember that those that raped them were also raped, one day they don't. One day they're confronted and then they say, yes, they also had to rape. And then, you know how the media works. It's an intricate topic, and to deliver an intricate message, I have been tending to that through political assassination prevention. Don't ask me how. I'm not going to explain that to you. That was 3-4 consecutive years of trauma after trauma and shock after shock, aside from the targeting, aside of all the things that I was going through myself, just to process what is going on. And the fact that to give you the names, I don't have the names, but to give you the names would be playing to the reason of the very extortion cults that run these Peter rings. They take away these people, fantastic. Now they get the new heads popping. It's happening just in time, where who died? One Rothschild person died, Kissinger died, the Centaurians died, the wealth is changing, so they want to out with the old leaders, and you get the French Revolution, and you get, okay, this name and that name, but the practice, we want to end the practice of ritual sacrifice, the practice of Peter rings, then we need to have deeper points of interferences, which in various ways I'm pointing at through the different topics that I discuss here. So then what would be the weapon to fund for that? I guess that's on another topic, because I would have to think about it as well. And this extends to our economic philosophy and practice, because we need to know the nitty-gritty of philosophy, capitalism, socialism, how money works in praxis. But we also need to have an accommodation for liberty, an accommodation for sovereignty, an accommodation for the values of the spirit of the time. Aries, everybody wants sovereignty. Pluto in Aquarius, people begin to be discerning. Democracy happened because people began to awaken and to ask questions. So people care more about their sovereignty, and they care more about those fiscal decisions and those resources allocation political decisions. And then it is possible to have a democracy, because people begin to actually discern information. Okay, so I'm not in the opinion of Churchill that the best argument against democracy is the common voter. Okay, not because there aren't times where it isn't true, but because the times where we democratize coincide with the times of Pluto in Aquarius, where people begin to genuinely care about these topics, and they begin to be more discerning, which calls for decentralization of power. And when it's done in a way, and we learn from the past, and we already know how civil wars behave, we already know who takes the civil wars, then we can have opportunities opening up for wealth practices, and also the economicity of doing the 2080. If what is the 20% that works is actually being adapted to decide that once human rights win in the civil war that happens every 84 years. So when you think old money and you think a couple of centuries, every 84 years is quite a lot, and there are always the squares and the oppositions to that. And so when we think about preparing ourselves for the fact that the side that wants to not be a slave is going to win the war, and if we are fiscally prepared, and if we are wealth practice-wise prepared, and if our ancestry is prepared, then we're not going to be seeing that as a tragedy, and we're not going to be striving to hold on to the old power, let our name be exposed in some Peter ring scandal. So on the one hand, what Rockefeller said is true. If you control the infrastructure of the economy of a country, you don't care who wins the elections. This is true for in between civil wars. But when it comes to the civil war, you don't want to be for the civil war. You don't want to have that scandal on your company's name. You will survive the scandal, but if you can avoid that, then why not? You don't want to be the family that because they spent the 80% that they didn't on the sides that were trying to hold on to slavery, one not only lost their assets, but also raised a wave of anti-Semitism as well, and lost the prestige of the family, a lot of the prestige of the family, and the diplomatic relations with the country that was no longer a monarchy, which was France. I know they still work with the Rothschilds, and used to. Yes, I'm not. I live in Israel, so Israel is funded a lot by the Rothschilds. So this is more like an open conversation that I want to be that to be accessible for most people, because the problems that you have with Israel, with the Mossad, with the Rockefeller, with the Rothschilds, you're gonna have with every wealth family and every intelligence services and every country. So if we address these problems, it's nice side note, if we address these problems, then structurally, and we tend to them, then we are basically creating an infrastructure of not only the wealth of nations and wealth families, but also people and leaders, because when eclipse is time, then people are leaders and leaders are people. And yes, this is going to be the very first episode in my Sirius Talis Moon channel on YouTube. You can see it as Shirley Tali Jungblood. New election. There's a lot of stuff about declarations of independence. I'll see what is coming up. And there was a huge bomb right now. I have no idea why. No siren. So I dropped the bomb, so to speak.